What is up, book nerds? My name is Hillary, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I am bringing you my March wrap-up, and boy, is it a big one. For the month of March, I read 12 books, and so far for this year, it is the most books I have read in a month. And I will say, some of them I did physically read, and others I listened to an audiobook. But enough about that, and let's just get right on into the books that I read this month. So the first two books I'm going to talk about here are ones that I partially read and then decided to DNF them because I ended up not really liking them and I got kind of bored. And the first one that I DNF'd and is going to be unhauled is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and the second book is Spells Trouble by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. I just could not get into these two books, and I'm trying to save myself from getting in reading slumps this year, and in order to do that, I just have to get rid of the books that I'm not vibing with or really getting into. So now we're going to get into the books that I did complete this month. And I know the two books that I did not finish were part of my TBR, but since I started them and tried to read them, I wasn't going to count them towards a punishment for the month of April because technically, even if I mean, it's my rules and I did try to read them. It's not like I just ignored them, so. Alright, the first book that that is on this completed list is Cress by Marissa Meyer. This book is part of the Lunar Chronicles series, and this one is about, well, it's a Rapunzel retelling, and all of the books in this series are Disney princess retellings. Like the first one is a Cinderella retelling, the second one is a Red Riding Hood retelling, and this one was Rapunzel. And the next one, Winter, is a Snow White retelling. I really enjoy these books. They're just fun books to listen to on audio, and the narrator is really, really good. This one is probably my favorite out of the whole series, but I'm just going to give you a summary of what the Lunar Chronicles is about. It is about... It's in a dystopian world, and these are sci-fi books, but in this world, you have humans, and you have people who are half human, half cyborg, and in the book, Cinder, she is like the main character of these books, but she is part cyborg, and the queen of the planet that she came from is coming and wants to basically take over Earth. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but in Cress, she is locked in a space, she's locked in space, and she's by herself, and Cinder and her crew come to rescue her, and it is a crazy ride of a book, and there's an illness going around from the first book that are killing humans, but in Cress, you're finding out that it is contagious to even the lunar people who are part cyborg. So in the next one, I am hoping that we learn more about this sickness, and I'm excited to read that one because a Snow White retelling just sounds like a good time. The next book that I read was a library book, and I've heard great things about this book, especially on Katie Colson's channel, which I will link her channel down below, so if you want to go check her out, do it. She is amazing. And that book is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. This is my first Frederick Bachman book, and it is very short. It's only 70-something pages, and it is about an older guy who is going through the kind of like the steps to getting Alzheimer's or dementia. You don't know for sure which one it is, and you're hearing his points of view on how he met his wife, who has passed since, and he's telling these stories in his mind to his grandson, and his grandson is exactly like him. And he's going through and also talking about how he, quote unquote, failed as a father to his grandson's dad. And it was a very impactful book, and it's the type of book that after you get done with it, you're either going to sob crying, or like my stomach just, it hurt. Like I could have cried, but I didn't. But it's very impactful, and I really enjoyed this book. I read it in like one sitting, and it was a very beautiful story. The next book that I read is one that is part of a series, but they say you can read them by themselves, but I kind of wish I would have started with the first book, and because this book was kind of confusing. But that book is Come Tumbling Down by Shannon McGuire. This is part of the Wayward Children series, and this is about Jack and Jill, who are twin sisters, and one comes back from their universe. So every kid in these stories has their own home, or in a way universe, that is on like another side, and it fits to them. And this one was interesting, but I was kind of confused with all the characters, especially since I didn't read the first one. But I'm hoping to get to the first one and maybe read all of the books and then come back to this one, because I might like it more and give it a higher rating on Goodreads just for the understanding. But at the start of this book, you see, I think it's Jack who comes back, and she is not in her own body. Her sister Jill switched bodies with her, and she's asking the Wayward Children to come back and help her get her body back. And it was a whirlwind of a ride to read, and was very interesting. But this was my first Shannon McGuire book that I've read, and I absolutely like her writing. It's very simple and whimsical and easy to read. The next book on here is one that I got from the library, and it's the first book I've read by this author. And I will say it's more of an 18+ book because it has some really spicy scenes in it, and it's a paranormal book. But it's called Cat's Lair by Christine Feehan. Now these are technically a series, but you can read them by themselves, and that's exactly what I did. I believe this is the 6th or 7th in a Leopard novel, or the Leopard series, and it was a very fun read. It was nice to break up some fantasy books that I was reading at the beginning with this book, and it only took me like 3 days to read. But this is about a girl named Katerina, but everybody calls her Kat, and she is running from somebody, and then enter Ridley, who is trying to keep her safe, but Kat has a hard time trusting people, because if the person who she's running from finds her, he's going to end up killing everybody. And I don't want to give too much away, because you want to go in with an open mind with this, because a lot happens, and if I give too much away, the whole story will be kind of known to what happens in it. But I really enjoyed this book, and I've been now looking into getting more of Christine Feehan's books, because like I said, they are easy to read, and romances are nice to have when you're trying to break up your reads between fantasy or sci-fi or just intense reads, and you want to stay out of those reading slumps. Another book I want to talk about is one that I read for a read-along. Absolutely enjoyed it. This was a reread for me, and it gives you more to this character in this book. But that book is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Man, reading it a second time, you catch on to more things that you didn't catch the first time reading it. But I know, I've been saying it in every video, Throne of Glass is about a girl named Selena who is part of a competition for the king to become basically his assassin. And in the second one, it is right after that competition, and Selena is put in charge of killing certain people that the king once killed, and a lot of things happen in this book. It is very intense, and you get the love scenes in it, the romance, and I love the friendship between her and I forget the girl's name in the book. I love their friendship, and when that scene happens, and if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, it just shatters your heart. You're so mad and everything, but this book is slowly bringing everything together that you're learning about from the novella and then the first book, and you're just shocked in it. I mean, I guessed the ending when I first read it. It's not like too crazy, and for Sarah J. Maas to write the Throne of Glass series starting at the age of 16 and then it getting published 10 years later, it's amazing how she came up with a lot of this stuff. And I couldn't imagine at the age of 16 that I would have thought of writing a book like this or even a series. And I gave this one 4 stars and absolutely loved it, and I am so ready to read the next book in this series and then talk about it with other bookish people on Instagram. And then following that, I'm just going to say I read Throne of Glass, and I already talked about what this book is about. This one I gave 4 stars to also and loved it, and I'm not going to talk too much about it since I already talked about it right before this. But yeah, I would say read this book. It is this series is one of the booktube like oldies, and everybody loves it and talks about it. The next 2 books that I completed, but I listened to them on audiobook because they're such big books, is I'm going to talk about the first one, and that's on top here, which is the last in this series, and I'm so happy I completed it, and that is Breaking Dawn by Stephenie Meyer. I loved this book. I loved how the story ended and it all came around. I just wish, like, in the movie, when the Volturi come and all the action scenes happen in the movie, I wish that would have been in this book, because in a way that part was really boring, and I think it would have made this book so much better. And I gave this one, I believe, 4 stars, and it was nice to get to understand everybody's point of view of what Bella was going through with her pregnancy and seeing Jacob there. And I was always a Jacob stan, and I absolutely loved him as a character. And I'm hoping that Stephenie Meyer comes out with a book either with Alice's story or a continuation that talks about Jacob and Renesmee and their relationship. And then the other book by that author that I read was Midnight Sun, and this one, I don't know what it is about it, but there were some parts in this book that did not match up with Twilight. This is a retelling, well, it's not a retelling. This is Twilight, but in Edward's point of view. I will say I loved learning about how Edward felt when Bella came and how he dealt with the temptation of drinking her blood and all that, and how it really did hurt him, and seeing everything happen in his point of view. But I just feel like this book really didn't need to happen. We didn't need it. I feel like Stephenie Meyer should have, like I said, wrote a book with Jacob and Renesmee, or Alice and Jasper, or Rosalie and Emmett's story, because you get a little bit of a view in all the Twilight books of what they all went through, but I want their backstory and what their lives were like before they became a Cullen. And this book just didn't hit it for me. Nothing against Twilight. I love Twilight. I love the books. But I just feel like this one was unnecessary. The next book that I finished this month was one that was so good, and I actually cried at the end listening to this, because I did listen to this one on audio, and I feel like that's the way it should go, because you have 2 narrators, one for the boy and one for the girl, and they just did such a good job reading it. But that book is All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. This is about a boy named Finch and a girl named Violet. And Finch is someone who is obsessed with, like, learning about dying and all the information about how long you can go without sleeping, or just things like that. And Violet lost her sister in a car accident, and she's just waiting until the day that she can graduate and leave the small town that she's in. But then one day during class, her and Finch end up as partners for a school project, which is to find unique places in Indiana and to tell what they're about and write a report about it. And as they're doing this, Finch and Violet end up starting to date, and Finch has a lot of, in a way, issues with his family life, and especially his dad, and you really see that in this book. And then the ending just tore me apart, especially the scene with the shoes. And I am excited to watch the movie on Netflix, and I definitely will be doing a book to movie comparison because I absolutely love this book and think that a lot of kids should read this, and even parents, because a lot of times parents don't see the signs of depression or anxiety in their kids, but this is a good way to learn more about the signs and all that. But very good, cried, and I want to read another one of her books. Also, this is at the end of that book, it talks about how Jennifer found a friend in her life that committed suicide, and that's the part that really gets you too, because I couldn't imagine finding a friend like that, and that's where she got the idea, like, with dealing with family stuff and knowing that her family members have had depression and anxiety but nobody ever talked about it. It's kind of like where she got the idea for the book. So yeah, I would check that out, but make sure before you read it, check out the trigger warnings for the book because it does talk about deep concepts. The next book on this list was a thriller, and I will say it was really predictable. But that book is The Golden Couple by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. And this is about a couple who start going to counseling, and the wife tells the husband that she slept with somebody, but she won't tell him who, and the whole time you're trying to figure out who she slept with, but in other ways there is somebody that's stalking the wife, and the therapist is trying to figure out who it is, but the therapist isn't like your general therapist. She's very involved in her clients' lives. And in that aspect, I really liked it, but towards the end, I just was bored and very disappointed in this book. And this is the first book I have read by this author, and I have a couple of her other books, and I don't know if I want to read them because I've heard a lot of her books are the same. It's a lot of like domestic thrillers and things like that, and I just feel like that's not my vibe for books. But if that is your vibe, go read this. Make sure you check out the trigger warnings for it. And if you have a different opinion about this book, let me know in the comments because I want to know what other people think about. And again, my opinions about the books that I read are just my opinion, and everybody is entitled to their own opinions. The next books and final books that I read for this month are A Curse So Dark and Lonely and A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmer. These are the part of the Curse Breaker series, and I am currently reading the last book in this series. The first one is it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it is about Ren, who is a prince, and every autumn, at the end of it, his life restarts, and he's the age of 18 again. And in that time, he has to find somebody in our world to fall in love with him, and that way, because he is cursed by a mage smith, because he was very cruel before all this happened. And I loved Harper in this book. She has cerebral palsy and doesn't let that stop her from learning new things or fighting or learning swordplay, and she is very hard-headed in this book, and I love that because she just tells Ren how it is, And there's also Gray, and Gray is the only one who can leave for a little while at the end of the autumn season, because he's the one who goes and finds a new girl to bring to his world for Ren to fall in love with. And I absolutely loved Gray a lot more than I liked Ren in this book. He goes from being like scary Gray to being gentle Gray, and ends up being one of my favorite characters in the book. And then you have A Heart So Fierce and Broken, and this is in Gray's point of view, is right after A Curse So Dark and Lonely happens and Gray is gone. You don't know, well, you know that he lives from the first book, and he is in hiding because Ren is trying to find the rumor of the Heir, and how the Heir has magic just like Lilith did in the first one, who caused the curse on Ren. And so Gray is hiding, and the guards end up finding him one day and bring him back to the palace, and Ren wants to know who the Heir is, because at the end of the first book, during this book, Karis Lurin, it tells Ren that Captain Gray would know who the first Heir is, and so that's why he captures him, because he has information and he wants to get rid of the Heir. But then Gray ends up escaping Ren's capture and is on the run with Leah Mara, who is the princess of, I can't remember, Sil Shallow, something like that. And she's trying to get Gray to come to her place and work with her mom so they can have peace with Ember Fall and work on a deal. And I loved Gray in this book. I want him to be my book boyfriend because I just love him so much. That's all I want to say. I don't know what else to say about this book, but read it. I think this is good for like 13 to 15-year-olds, or if you just like YA and want a break and don't want to concentrate too much on the book that you're reading, this series would be a good one for you to read. But that is it for this video. I know that was a lot of books that I read for this month, and I'm hoping in April I read just as much, because I have my TBR, I have the Thankful-a-thon challenges of books to read, and I have more library books I need to get to. But if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you have read any of the books that I mentioned, leave a comment down below and let's discuss it, let's talk about it. And everybody else, just be nice to everybody in the comments. If you want to know when I am posting, hit that subscribe and that notification bell, and you will be the first to know when my next video goes up. And until next time, keep on reading, people. Bye!